Hey, warm up, brother, hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined here by Ivetta Abramyan today. We're going to have a two-part conversation with her. We have to talk about all the happenings with Michigan. Does she think that any of these guys might be entering into the transfer portal? We're now about 6 or 7 days since Dusty May decided that he was going to be heading to the NBA. As of right now, the roster is intact, but we'll be diving in there. What can we expect out of Michigan now moving forward, now that Mike Boynton, who used to be the coach over at Oklahoma State and was part of the coaching staff last few seasons, he takes over as the coach. And then additionally, I want to talk with her a little bit about the ACC. She's got some ties to Florida State, and for the Seminoles, I think that they might be in for a really good year this season. It's an ACC that I feel like did a nice job in terms of being able to upgrade some of the, shall we say, lesser teams in the offseason. We saw quite a few coaching changes over at Boston College, Georgia Tech, so much more. So we'll be taking a look at the lay of the land in the ACC in part number 2 of the conversation. Look a little bit more at Michigan here in part 1. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to throw those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, maybe does not matter. So as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions, because it helps the off season go by a little bit faster, and it makes things just a little bit more fun in general. So please do send in those Twitter/X questions, and I'll be sure to get you guys conference previews for every single conference. The Coastal Conference is going to be up next. You're probably going to be getting that within, I would say, the next 48 or so hours, already through 5 conference previews. So we're on a relatively good pace in comparison to past off seasons. So I am very happy about that. As I always like to say, bets that are won during the season, they're won through great preparation. They're won through just being able to take a look at the lay of the land in college basketball here in the offseason, and then being prepared for what is going to be a huge and just rambunctious season. So hopefully I'm doing my best to be able to help out there, and being able to help us out here on this podcast to get set for that great season is a bunch of great guests. And Ivetta, she is certainly one of them, as she does great work over at bracketeer.org. She does a great job year in and year out with her college basketball tour, just taking a look at all these great venues across this amazing sport. You're able to follow her on the old Twitter/X at her first and last name, Ivetta Abramyan, Ivettaabramyan, all together. And Ivetta, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Hi, Greg. Thank you as always for having me. Yeah, huge bomb dropped on the college basketball world here in the past week.
Absolutely. You don't see it very often in late June, where the coach of the reigning champions decides that he is going to go to the NBA, but that's exactly what we had with Dusty May. And just how do you take a look at the outlook now for this Michigan team? Because as we are recording this, none of these guys have entered in the transfer portal. They have about 30 days to be able to do so. And you have to think that for some of these Michigan guys, they're wondering if there might be any NIL collectives that might be able to come up with some money, or roster spots in general that might be out there. But I think that's really interesting to take a look at where this Michigan team is right now, because it's just a very, very unprecedented situation, losing your coach from such a successful team this late in the process.
Yeah, it is very unprecedented. And you know, he's always been candid about pursuing the NBA, never signed a contract with Michigan. So that was a glaring sign that he could potentially make a move. And as you know, he's stated that the college environment was what pushed him to that decision. Pretty forthright in interviews, especially recent interviews, about how taxing it is to coach college basketball and dealing with NIL and the portal, and how frustrated he was with the uncertainty around the sport. So I think the shock just comes from the fact that it happened much sooner than we expected. And like you said, so late in the year. So it can come off as a little opportunistic, because he used that same system to his advantage and he knew it wasn't sustainable. And then he waits this long to announce this at the point where all the teams are pretty much complete. So I understand the frustration, especially obviously from Michigan fans, but at the same time, you know, he won them a national title. This was the largest 2-year win improvement in the history of D1, from 8 wins to 36 wins. What was that, in like 27 or 28 months? So you can't really complain, especially for the caliber coach that Dusty May is. He's great at player buy-in, player development, obviously X's and O's, but he's an excellent talent evaluator. He's a great roster builder. So, you know, he wants to shoot his shot in the NBA. So we'll see how that works out. But I think that it seems like with the Boynton hire that they'll be able to keep the roster together. Some of these players will likely renegotiate their contracts, especially now with the leverage, but they really need to hold on to the bigs. So specifically Cham, who was among one of the most coveted players in the portal. And he doesn't really have any ties to Michigan. I could definitely see teams like BYU and Arkansas. So teams that still need a starting center that can also afford him. I could definitely see some conversations happening there. So that factor is pretty intriguing to me. JP Estrella would be a big loss. And I believe he's staying, but Elliot Cadeau would obviously also leave a huge void if he left. Again, I think the rest of the supporting cast is going to stay from what we're seeing so far. But yeah, I think Cham is number one. They need to figure out how to hold on to him. And then also if Estrella or Cadeau gets any last minute offers, but I feel pretty confident about Cadeau. I don't know any teams that really still need a point guard of that caliber. But yeah, so that's kind of what my thoughts are, is if they can hold on to the bigs, there's a high likelihood that they could keep the continuity of this roster.
Yep, and I'm thinking so as well, because I feel like if we would have seen one of these guys want to leave in the transfer portal, we probably would have seen it already, and I think that it's going to be interesting to take a look at the dynamic under Mike Boynton, because I think the big question is not whether or not there's going to be a drop-off in coaching, but how much, because with Boynton, I know that there are so many people in coaching circles, what have you, that just think the world of Mike Boynton, but I wish I could put it any other way. It just felt like it was a little bit underwhelming over at Oklahoma State. Only one NCAA tournament appearance, and that's when you had Cade Cunningham, and we've seen what he's been able to do in the NBA on the roster, and even that year, it felt like they left a little bit of something on the table, and that's what right now has me feeling a little bit nervous about this Michigan team. Even though they have a coach with some Division I coaching experience at the power conference level, it just felt like his team's underachieved a little bit at the back half of his tenure over at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to gauge because, Boynton was kind of forced into these head coaching roles. So it's interesting. And obviously it's hard to compare the Oklahoma State situation. I mean, he went 119 and 109 in 7 seasons. But then, there was the controversy and the FBI scandal and all that stuff. We're going to see how this goes. And I don't have the highest of hopes. I agree with you. I think what's going to happen, I think they're going to court shirts throughout the season. And he got interest from Syracuse, from NC State very, very recently, but he's getting that 10 mil in NIL at St. Louis. So he's been waiting for a top level job. And I know him and Dusty May are friends. So I think they're going to court him throughout the season, given everything goes the way that as we anticipate it to go, unless Boynton, again, has a phenomenal year, in which case, I guess he definitely deserves the job. But I think if they court shirts throughout the year, if he doesn't take it, I know they have some other options. So I'm kind of in that camp too. And my wild theory is that if the NBA doesn't work out for Dusty May, because we all know how unstable the NBA landscape is, especially the Mavs franchise. They've been kind of a mess since Cuban sold the majority of it back in 2023. So I think if the NBA doesn't work out for Dusty May, and in 3 years, the landscape of college basketball is more stable, which is a big if. My wild theory is Mark Cuban helps write a check to get Dusty May to Indiana. That's my wild hot take. But yeah, as far as the immediate future, I think that they're going to give Boynton a shot, but I don't think that's going to stop them from courting some of the more high profile coaches throughout the season.
I'm in agreement with you there. I think that's going to be ongoing with that situation, and I'm very, very curious to see how that does go, as we've got our good friend Ivetta Abramyan joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ivetta, it is going to be interesting to see what happens there, but here in the second part of this chat, I wanted to talk with Ivetta about what we can expect out of Florida State and the ACC as a whole. As we know, the ACC has fallen on some tough times over the last few years, but I feel like some of the coaching changes that have been made over the last 2 or 3 years is starting to get this conference back up to prominence. Florida State is a team that I really think could be able to ascend this season, so we'll chat with Ivetta about that on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuscus Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ivetta Abramyan. She does great work over at Bracketeer.org. She does a great job with her yearly college basketball tour and so much more, just paying attention to this great game of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. You're able to follow her on the old Twitter /X at Ivetta Abramyan, IVETTA ABRAMYAN, all together. And Ivetta, you're based out there in Florida, and last time we were on with you, we chatted about the Atlantic Sun, which was great. Now let's take a look at one of the bigger teams out there in the state of Florida. Not the Gators, but I know you've got a little bit of affinity to Florida State, and they're a team that I really feel like could ascend this season. I want to get your thoughts on them and the ACC landscape, because the ACC, in my opinion, has really taken some strides forward with a lot of the bottom teams in that conference over the last few years, with Florida State being one of them. You know as well as I do, Florida State was playing so much better basketball towards the back half of the season rather than the front half. If you looked at only the final 20 games, I would say that they were definitely playing like an NCAA tournament team. And how do you take a look at them for this upcoming season? Because obviously there's a little bit of roster turnover, what have you, but Luke Locks, he's now in season number 2, and I feel like this could be a team that's sort of hiding in plain sight as a team that, especially with an expanded NCAA tournament field, might be able to make some noise.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where Laux kind of wants to be, is flying under the radar. And obviously a lot of people thought that Florida State should have gotten in based on, you have to look at the whole body of work, obviously. But if you look at the second half of the season, I know a lot of people were saying that, just their improvement, that the back half of the season would have earned them a tournament bid, had they been more consistent. But yeah, as far as entering his second year, now he's got all his own guys pretty much now, right? So he kind of is able to build the roster from scratch, and he's still going to follow his coaching style, his NBA style offense mentality, wants to be the fastest team in the country, wants to shoot the most threes. But I think he is going to incorporate a little bit more defense this year, which is what was lacking last year, especially at the beginning of the season. He's got better pieces now to make those changes. So I'm really excited about this team. The roster is not the same caliber as some of these other ACC teams, especially what some of these teams have done in the offseason. Obviously, Louisville, one of the best in the country, added elite talent. They started with Badunga, who's arguably the identity on the team. Then they added Shellstad and Montgomery Knox, Fulgueras. They're a Final Four caliber team. Miami's going to be, on paper, they're going to be good. They built their roster around Somto Cyril and Caden Lewis. They added some complementary pieces in Deshaun Good from Robert Morris, Nick Dorn from Indiana. Duke, obviously, focus on that elite returning talent they had. John Blackwell is a 40% three-point shooter, just a great versatile guard. So they added Drew Sharnowski, I think he's out of Belmont, for pressure at the rim. NC State had to rebuild their roster after the whole Wade debacle. They've got some great pieces there. Obviously, there's UNC. Hopefully, Avdilas has a breakout season. He wasn't very efficient last year. I think we all kind of had higher hopes for him. But the ACC is going to be stronger as a whole. It's great for Florida State, too, obviously, in the sense of competition, right? And I think the cream's going to rise to the top, and I think it's only going to better Luke Laux' squad to play higher competition teams. So I think with the stronger ACC as a whole, that's going to benefit all the mid-tier and bottom-tier teams in the ACC as well. So obviously there's Virginia. I didn't even mention them. This is just based on these off-season moves, but a lot of these teams already had kind of the core pieces that they've just built around. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the ACC. I would say almost as excited as I am about the Big East, because I think I'm really excited to see how they rebuild, because it seems like they've gotten all their ducks in a row. So we'll see how it actually translates and how they actually execute. But I think the ACC is also going to be very much improved.
Yep, I think that the ACC is going to be as well. Even a team like Boston College deciding to get a guy like a Luke Murray in the offseason, I thought that was tremendous for them. And with regards to the ACC as well, I think that's going to be one of those conferences that are going to be top heavy, because Louisville and Duke, I think that they have separated themselves as by far the best two teams in the conference. But is there a team or two outside of Florida State that you think could be able to rise? Because I'm very curious to see what Syracuse does in year number one under Jerry McNamara. Feels like things have fizzled maybe a little bit over at Virginia Tech. They're probably going to be looking to be able to get that thing rolling. But is there one or two teams that's maybe outside like that top three, top four? Because certainly I think that Virginia and North Carolina, even with North Carolina having questions, they're going to be there. But is there another team that you're taking a look at that you really feel like could be flying under the radar and take some strides forward?
It's tough to say because there's so many teams now in the ACC. It's one of those things where you can always expect like a Wake Forest or a SMU or one of these teams that kind of sneak up on you, Pitt, obviously Clemson. You can always expect Clemson to overachieve, I guess. But I don't have high hopes for the West Coast teams. I'll be honest, I haven't really seen anything that's really impressed me there. But yeah, I agree about the Syracuse situation. We'll see. It's just too early to tell. I think, they've got some decent pieces there. But yeah, like you got Syracuse, Pitt, SMU, Virginia Tech has cooled off, Wake Forest, and then you got like Clemson and Georgia Tech. So if we do get a surprise, Greg, I'm thinking it's probably from one of those teams, but you never know. It's all relevant, right? Because some of these teams were just so bad last year that any sort of improvement is going to be great. And then it all comes down to matchups. And especially for the ACC, where you're going coast to coast, no pun intended, you're going to see a lot of these wins and losses that are more unexpected with a lot of the travel. So we'll see how that goes. Notre Dame is another one of those teams. I don't really have a favorite out of those as far as one that I have higher expectations for, but I think any of those teams can, especially with scheduling, once all the schedules are complete, and then we can see kind of where they sit with their schedule difficulty. I think that we could definitely expect some of those bottom to mid-tier teams to maybe finish 5th or 6th or 7th, something like that.
I'm in agreement with you there. It is going to be a very interesting ACC for this upcoming season. The state of Florida seems to have some pretty solid schools out there in the ACC. We'll see if they're going to be able to take some strides forward, and especially a team like Miami. They were able to come onto the scene last year. They had themselves a great year, and it's always a great podcast when you're aboard, Ivetta. You're doing great work over at bracketeer.org. You're doing a great job taking a look at all things out there in the great state of Florida. And I always know that you've got your great college basketball tour every single year as well. So we'll have the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media to other platforms.
Thanks again, Greg. You can follow me on X/Twitter at my full name, Ivetta Abramyan, IVETTA Abramyan. We'll probably start previewing some rosters come August. And then around September, we'll start looking at schedules to see which teams set themselves up for competitive success and a good chance at an NCAA tournament bid.
Absolutely. And our good friends over there at bracketeer.org are doing such an amazing job of scheduling. Rocco Miller is truly the king of that. I know that Ivetta, along with Robbie Listella, are doing an incredible job in terms of being able to enhance and elevate that even further. So a big thanks to Ivetta for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and certainly things have simmered down with the transfer portal. We have yet to see any of the Michigan guys enter into the transfer portal. That's certainly something that I'm going to be taking a look at here in the coming days and coming weeks, because that was obviously a big bombshell, but as we are starting to get, shall we say, locked in with regards to all these rosters, as things are finalized there, you're getting a bunch of conference previews. We're already through 5 of them, and you can expect the Coastal Conference preview probably within the next, I would say, about 48 or so hours. I'm hard at work on that, and this is a podcast that has went over 2,400 straight days without a missed podcast, so you know that you're going to be getting a fresh podcast every single day, because with 366 Division I teams, there is no shortage of research to be done, and as I like to say, bets that are won during the season, they are won through doing great research, they are won through just putting in the work here in the offseason, so I plan on making this season the best ever, and once we're back in season picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, so I'll appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.